Kyle, let's start off right at the 101. A bit of a surprise with Drew Sanders, the Arkansas linebacker, going over the presumed first defensive player off the board in the NFL draft, Will Anderson. What was your thoughts when your colleague Aaron took Drew Sanders at the 101?
Oh yeah, it's super interesting because the thought is Will Anderson is such a and a big time NFL premier prospect, and he's a premier IDP prospect, and he is looked at as the number one overall IDP asset, edge and overall. And I think it's super interesting. Aaron decided to go Sanders. Knowing Aaron, I know he's a big Drew Sanders fan, and me and you were actually just DMing yesterday talking about how Sanders is rising. He is the odds-on favorite to be the first linebacker off the board currently. And he's getting that first round buzz. And he sounds like, if there is, as it sits right now, he is the likely linebacker to possibly get a back end of the first round capital. So it's interesting. Aaron went Sanders there. He's getting his guy. He's got the first pick, and if he wants him, he's got to take him right away. I tend to lean towards Anderson. I like those premier edge assets. They hold up. Longevity wise, value wise, they hold up longer. And so I mean, Anderson's my guy, but I understand where Aaron's coming from, and he explains it in his analysis of the pick.
Yeah, it makes sense that if Drew Sanders is his guy, he's not going to be there when he gets to pick again. Right. It's 6 guys in this mock draft. You all each had 2 picks per round, 2 total rounds. You can check it out, footballguys.com. And so I get it. If you're sitting there at the 101, Sanders is not going to make it back to you for your next pick. If, like you said, if you want to get your guy, I get it. And obviously, Drew Sanders is in the conversation as the LB1 in this class. I know Adam has gone back and forth on our show. Is Sanders his LB1? Is it Jack Campbell? We know Bobby's a big Deion Henley guy. We'll talk more about him a little later. But for me, Will Anderson is the pick there at 101. Obviously, if you are in a tackle-heavy league, maybe that pushes you more towards linebacker. But even in a tackle-heavy league, it's still Anderson for me because of the longevity, like you mentioned, of these edge rushers. These guys are going to have a longer shelf life in the NFL. Now, we'll say they typically take longer to develop. So if you're a contender and you want to be able to plug in what you think can be a 3-down linebacker who can be productive right out the gate for your team, okay, I get it. But again, Dynasty, I'm still going Anderson because of that longevity. You're going to have, potentially 6 to 8 to maybe even 10 years of this guy's career. And also it's a premium position, which means for me, less replaceable. So I would have gone with Will Anderson at the 101, but I understand the argument for Drew Sanders there. Let's look at the first round in general, Kyle, because this was something that I think speaks to what I've been hearing about this draft, which is very strong DL, kind of edge, D-tackle class. Some interesting linebackers, 3 to 4 guys that we feel good about. The safety class is very weak, and we see that show up here in this first round mock. It is DL dominated. 8 DL, so edge rusher, D tackle, 3 linebackers, 1 safety. Did this surprise you at all?
No, I this is kind of what I expected. Being it is such a strong edge class. It is just there's a lot of good players, and they come in all different shapes and sizes, and the super talented group. And the linebackers, from the beginning of I guess once the season, the NFL season, fantasy season ended, and you transitioned into rookie season here, you kind of heard these top 3 guys talked about the most: Drew Sanders, Trenton Simpson, Jack Campbell. It's kind of formed a tier, like you said, a tier of 3 guys there. And Deion Henley, who's somebody we're going to talk about here in a little, spoiler alert, talk about in a little while. He's kind of, emerging up there too. But the linebacker group in general is it's going to require a lot of projection, I think. And like anything, the NFL draft's going to help shape that group a little more. As we get more information, what they feel about them. But the edge group's strong, and and then you sprinkle in the defensive tackles along with them, with Carter and Brissy and Kalijah Cansey. The DL is a really strong group. So it's about what I was expecting to see.
Yeah, so let's kind of give the recap here. And again, you can check this out, footballguys.com. Drew Sanders at 101, Anderson at the 102. Then we get a run of 3 edge rushers in Murphy, Wilson, and Van Ness. And then a couple linebackers come off the board, Jack Campbell, Trenton Simpson. And then our first D tackle at the 108, Jalen Carter out of Georgia. Then it goes Nolan Smith, Brian Brissy, Kalijah Cansey, and then Brian Branch, the safety out of Alabama, is the only DB taken in the first round of this mock at the 112. Kyle, let me ask you this, because we've been debating, do we think that Will Anderson goes first round of mixed offensive and defensive rookie drafts? What's your take? And do you think if it is Anderson in the first, is there any other IDP that you can make a case for or that you think will be taken in the first round of rookie drafts?
I think there's a chance Anderson could go back into the first. There really is. I think we have to see how this like wide receiver class shakes out. NFL wise, where they go capital wise, landing spot wise, to see how we kind of feel about that in mixed drafts. I think there's a chance Anderson does go, the end of the first round rookies, maybe early 2. And I do think, if Drew Sanders does get that first round draft capital, say he goes to Buffalo, right? Big hole there. Trayman Edmonds is gone. We all love Terrell Bernard, but if they invest a first round pick, that 27th pick, I believe it is, in Drew Sanders, say, like, I've seen him in a few mocks, and granted, they're just mocks. If that happens, he could vault. I mean, early second, I could see early second with him. It's kind of like around where maybe Devin Lloyd was going last year. If you wanted to get him, you kind of had to be in that range. So I could see that. Will Anderson strikes me as the guy who could sneak into the end of the first. Sanders, the early second. So.
Yeah, linebacker capital will depend. I think there is a chance, depending on how landing spots shake out for offense, you could see a Jack Campbell or a Drew Sanders sneak in to the back end of the first as well. I think there's a chance, again, offense kind of depends here, but I think there's a chance that Will Anderson, if he lands in a good spot, which all those spots at the top of the draft are pretty nice to drop in a premium edge rusher, but I think we could see him go as early as 108, 109, and then I could absolutely see a Jack Campbell or Drew Sanders, depending on landing spot, go at the 111, 112. Definitely in range from like 201 to 203. So it'll be fascinating to see where these guys land. There are a couple, I would say those are the 3 guys for me that the linebackers less so, but Anderson, I think he is landing spot proof. We talked about this in the last podcast with Mike Wollert, that I think regardless of where he ends up, he immediately becomes a top dynasty asset at the edge position. Those linebackers are as close to landing spot proof as you can get. I think they will be early second round picks regardless of where they land. And if they get a really good spot, you could see them in the back of the first.